From what we hear, I mean, nobody really had anything bad to say about the guy.
Which is a problem when it comes to finding out who's trying to kill him.
I'm one of the managers at McDonald's, and I was taking an order when I seen this dude come and shot the guy.
So he's in the car?
Yes, he's dead.
Sylvester Zottola, known by friends as Sally Dars, had accomplished a great deal by the time he entered his later years. He was a successful land developer, a beloved grandfather, and a celebrated figure in his Pelham Bay community. It seemed he had discovered a golden key, one that unlocked the door to success, friends, family, and wealth. There was one problem, however. While Sylvester was working on building his empire, someone else was working on how to kill him. I'm your host, Dr. Top Hat Shadow. And this is The Shadow Self. The Big Apple, known round the world as the city that never sleeps. It's the land of bright lights, grand buildings, and even grander dreams. It's been said that there are 1 million ways to make $1 million in New York City. And while that expression may hold true for some, it's also been said that in New York there are 6 million ways to die. Sylvester Zottola, known by most as Sally Dars, was born in the Bronx, New York, on April 17, 1947. Being of Italian descent, he came from a culture known for its abiding sense of family, strong work ethic, and centuries-long devotion to the church. With those 3 pillars to build upon, realizing the American dream was certainly a possibility for anybody with brains and ambition. And it appeared that Sally Dars had both. During the era in which Sylvester grew up, New York's 5 boroughs were ruled by what was known as the 5 families. These were the Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, and the Bonanos. 5 highly organized hierarchies known by outsiders as the Mafia, but known by insiders as Cosa Nostra, or rather, our thing. Growing up as an Italian American in one of the 5 boroughs meant that you'd often rub shoulders with a member of La Cosa Nostra, or that members of your family would be directly involved. As a young man making his way through the rough and tumble streets of the Bronx, Sylvester found early success as an entrepreneur. In 1972, at the age of 25, he started a company called Dars Amusements, which provided coin-operated vending machines to various restaurants, bars, and private clubs. These generated a sound income, but the most lucrative machines he owned were his Joker poker gambling devices. These machines proved to have quite the pull, particularly with those who possessed the gambler's itch. Decades passed, and his business continued to expand. Of course, being in this somewhat gray market business meant operating in conjunction with those who ran the black market. Although Sylvester was not known to be directly involved in organized crime, it was said that he had connections to the Lucchese family. These connections were never fully confirmed, but what was indeed confirmed was his friendship with Vincent Bossiano. Vincent was a high-ranking member of the Banana crime family. A captain known for getting his hands dirty when necessary, he rose through the ranks to become a boss. By the 1990s, Vincent and Sylvester had partnered in the Joker poker machine venture, also bringing in Sylvester's eldest son, Salvatore. Sylvester had 2 other children as well, his daughter Debbie and his younger son, Anthony, all of whom he raised as a single father, after the love of his life, Maria, passed away at the young age of 38. As his business ventures grew, so did his family. His children eventually had children of their own, and Sylvester became a doting grandfather to his grandkids. Sylvester expanded his business ventures by getting involved in property development. He built rows of attached family homes on both Hobart and Gillespie Avenues in the Pelham Bay neighborhood. These homes were rented out to local tenants, providing Sylvester with an abundant flow of passive income. He then developed a mega home complex in the Locust Point area, a quiet, secluded enclave near the peninsula with a yacht club and a sweeping view of the Throgs Neck Bridge. This luxury complex greatly improved the waterfront area, and it became known as Zottola's Court. Emblazoned proudly on the outside of one of the buildings was the quote, "Our walls are built thick, our love for each is thicker," while the other building had a plaque that read, "Our foundation is built from love. Our strength keeps us together." With his businesses turning a handsome profit and his connection to Vincent Bossiano, Sylvester continued investing in land and developing properties. Through decades of hard work, he eventually built up an empire worth an estimated $45 million. Persistence, a savvy business mind, and an entrepreneurial spirit had manifested into a great life for Sylvester, quite the payoff in the eyes of many. And as the Latin proverb says, after the battles come the rewards. However, in Sylvester's case, the battles were yet to begin. Throughout Pelham Bay, it was well known that Sally Dars' Amusement was the main provider of Joker poker machines. However, rumors began circulating that a group of Albanian mobsters had moved in and were setting up their own Joker poker businesses. Sylvester caught wind of this, and it did not sit well with him. He allegedly informed his partner, Vincent Bossiano, of their predicament. And according to reports, Vincent sent some of his men to go in deal with the Albanians. The Albanians were no slouches, however. In fact, the Albanian mob was one of the most feared crime syndicates in New York, with large-scale criminal operations spanning from the UK to South America to the United States. Many of them had come as refugees of war from Albania, Kosovo, and Serbia. They had seen the worst kind of bloodshed, and having escaped that, there wasn't much that could intimidate them. They'd already secured a presence in New York, particularly in the Pelham Bay neighborhood of the Bronx. And much of that presence was developed through a reputation for being extremely effective contract killers who were sometimes hired by other organized crime groups to carry out hits. They were a serious bunch, and any alleged conflict over poker machine territory could potentially spark violence, and in turn, make Sylvester a target.
A sort of uneasy history with the Bonanno crime family.
And not just the Bonanos. The Albanians allegedly went after gambling spots in Astoria, Queens, that were once controlled by the Gambino crime family.
Sylvester, now 70 years old, was walking near his home on Hobart Avenue in Pelham Bay when a strange man approached him. He said he was looking for a job, and he asked Sylvester if he had any available work. After some back and forth discussion, the man suddenly blindsided Sylvester, clubbing him over the head with a blunt object. Neighbors began yelling, and the man ran off, leaving Sylvester dazed, bleeding, and with a broken rib. When speaking with the police about the random attack, Sylvester's eldest son, Salvatore, stated that his father probably just thought the guy was mentally disturbed. That theory would be doubted, however, when on November 26th, Sylvester was in Edgewater Park, sitting idle in his car. A beige minivan pulled up beside him, and a man in a ski mask got out, pointing a gun at Sylvester and attempting to force him out of his car. Sylvester managed to throw his car in reverse, make a U-turn, and escape before the assailant could harm him. He made it to safety for the time being, but things were about to go from dangerous to deadly for Sylvester. A month passed, and Sylvester, feeling understandably paranoid, had begun carrying a gun for safety. It was Christmas season, and his daughter Debbie, who lived above him, had gone out of town on vacation. This meant that 70-year-old Sylvester would be home alone. He stepped out to run a few errands, but when he got back, something didn't feel right. Cautiously, he opened the front door and stepped inside. To his dismay, his intuition was correct. He found a group of armed men waiting for him inside his living room. They immediately pounced on him. He collapsed, and one of the men stabbed him in the back before slashing his throat. They then took his gun, emptied his safe, and left him for dead. A neighbor heard the commotion, and Sylvester was rushed to the emergency room. Now, it was crystal clear. Sylvester had enemies out there who were hunting him, and they were willing to go to great lengths in order to take him out for good. Sylvester's son, Salvatore, remembered the surveillance cameras, and he rushed over to the house to retrieve the footage. But when he checked the basement, he made a shocking discovery. The DVR was missing. Somehow, the attackers had known about the system. Salvatore reached out to Vincent Bossiano, who was now serving a lengthy term in prison. Perhaps Vincent, with his many connections in the streets, could help find out who was trying to kill Sylvester.
Your father's a salt of the earth. It's a salt of the earth. He helped out everybody. You know what I mean? I don't know who's got this problem that wanted to kill him.
It's somebody that he knows. There's somebody that knows his routine.
Right.
I just don't know who it is.
After a lengthy stay in the ICU, Sylvester pulled through. Against the odds, he had managed to survive yet another attack, which at any age would be lucky, but at 70 years old was short of miraculous. Upon being released, he decided to go into hiding, moving from house to house and never staying in one place for too long. 4 months had gone by without an incident, but if anyone inside of his circle thought he was free and clear, they would be wrong. This time, the surveillance system on Sylvester's Hobart Avenue home caught a beige minivan pulling up outside in the middle of the day. The driver suspiciously backed the van up, then began taking pictures of the surrounding area. He then brazenly walked the perimeter of the property, scoping it out for nearly 30 minutes, before finally leaving. At this point, paranoia was Sylvester's closest ally. He was staying at one of his properties on Mayflower Avenue in Pelham Bay, with his son Salvatore patrolling the area outside. While on patrol, Salvatore noticed a familiar vehicle approaching. The beige minivan. When the driver spotted Salvatore, he turned his vehicle around and drove away. Salvatore called his brother Anthony, telling him to get to the house immediately. Anthony quickly arrived, and Salvatore got in the car, pressing him to catch up to the van. But Anthony, who was busy sending a text, missed his opportunity, and the assailants got away for a fourth time. A week went by, and the Zottola family was on high alert. Sylvester, needing protection quickly, had gotten a gun without waiting on the permitting process, which would have taken 4 months. He was now back at his property on Hobart Avenue and was standing outside talking to a friend. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a familiar figure. The masked man who had been driving the beige minivan was walking in their direction, and he was carrying a gun. Sylvester raised his own gun, warning the man not to come any closer. The man then attempted to shoot Sylvester, but his gun jammed. Sylvester immediately fired a warning shot, forcing the assailant to run back to his vehicle where a getaway driver was waiting. The two of them sped off, and it appeared they would vanish into the shadows once more. The police were called, and they came to take a report.
He almost kind of looked like the guy that tried to shoot me in Locust Point, you follow me?
But to Sylvester's dismay, they ended up arresting him for discharging a firearm in public and criminal possession of a firearm. Even though he was protecting himself, he was placed in handcuffs and brought down to the local police precinct. It looked as though things were going from bad to worse for Sylvester. However, the Zottola family would unknowingly have a stroke of good luck. One of the assailants, the man with the gun, had been arrested a few blocks away from the incident. As the two men were getting away, a nearby police officer happened to see the vehicle speeding and driving erratically. When the officer attempted to pull the men over, they jumped out and tried to escape on foot. They ran past several stores, looking for a place to hide, and one of them ended up taking cover in a taxi stand parking lot. This would prove to be a mistake for him, as he was quickly apprehended and taken down to the station for processing. He was 32-year-old Ron Cabey of Brooklyn, New York. Ron had recently been released from prison, and although not a member himself, he was affiliated with members of the Bloods street gang in Brooklyn. The other man had managed to escape. Because he had been arrested blocks away from his attempted attack on Sylvester, it was unknown to the police that the two incidents were connected. Meanwhile, Sylvester was being processed for his unlicensed handgun, and Ron Cabey's getaway driver was still on the loose. Ron Cabey was not an Albanian mobster, and Sylvester had absolutely nothing to do with the Bloods or their business dealings. So why would Ron be so determined to kill Sylvester? Had Sylvester wronged somebody who was close to Ron? Had he unknowingly done something to make himself an enemy of the Bloods? Perhaps the Albanian mob hired Ron to do their dirty work. But then again, why would they need to hire Ron for that, when they themselves were known for supplying their own contract killers? Time would soon tell. A month had gone by without incident, but even with Ron in jail, that didn't mean the Zottola family was in the clear. On the early morning of July 11, 2018, Sylvester's eldest son Salvatore was leaving his lavish apartment at the waterfront Locust Point complex. This, according to neighbors, was Salvatore's vacation home, and he only stayed there during summer months. Information that a stranger would not normally be privy to. A little after 6:30 in the morning, Salvatore was walking to his blue Chrysler minivan when a dark gray Nissan pulled up alongside him. A man leaned out of the passenger side window and began shooting. Salvatore fell to the ground, scrambling desperately for cover behind his van. But the shooter pursued him, exiting the Nissan and firing several more bullets at point-blank range, while Salvatore rolled frantically to avoid being hit. Unfortunately, he was hit by multiple bullets, including one to the hand, one to the back, one to the chest, and one to the head. The shooter sped away, and this time, instead of Sylvester, it was Salvatore who would be rushed to the ICU. Salvatore was now a target as well. The Zottola family was in serious danger, and it seemed that none of them were safe. Sylvester and his family were under tremendous pressure, and that pressure was amplified now that Sylvester was having to deal with his unlicensed gun charge. While that arrest didn't require him to remain in jail, it did require him to drive back and forth to the courthouse for his legal proceedings. And unfortunately, that requirement would leave him exposed. On the early evening of October 4, 2018, Sylvester was returning from the courthouse. He decided to make a quick stop at a McDonald's drive-thru in order to grab a cup of coffee, something he often did when he was on Webster Avenue in the Bronx. He pulled up and placed his order, after which he began speaking on the phone with his girlfriend. Preoccupied by their conversation, he drove towards the pickup window to get his cup of coffee. As he pulled around the drive-thru bend, a shadowy figure stepped out from behind a dumpster stall. The figure was a male with a slim build, long wavy hair, wearing a baseball cap and mask. He crept down an embankment and approached the vehicle from behind the passenger side. Outside of Sylvester's peripheral view, there was no opportunity for him to see the assailant coming. He raised a black .32 caliber pistol, aimed it at Sylvester, and pumped multiple bullets through the passenger side window. One of the bullets struck Sylvester in the neck, and another in the head. Sylvester slumped back, his foot still on the gas pedal. His car inched forward, coming to a stop after crashing into a storage bin. The assailant made his quick escape, and witnesses called for an ambulance. But it was too late. Sally Dawes was dead.
Some guy got shot in the parking lot.
Somebody got shot?
All we know is somebody, but we're just taking care of customers. I'm one of the managers at McDonald's, and I was taking an order when I seen the dude come and shot the guy.
So he's in the car?
Yes, he's dead.
After multiple failed assassination attempts, this final one had been quick and precise. It had all the makings of a professional mob hit. And with Sylvester's loose ties to the Bonanno crime family, the media immediately began producing theories of who might have been behind it.
Tonight, murdered in a fast food drive-thru, a man sitting in his car, assassinated tonight in a hail of bullets. Was he killed because of his connection to a well-known organized crime family in New York? The shooting happening in the Claremont section of the Bronx tonight. Eyewitness News reporter Josh Einder is there live tonight with this bizarre and deadly mystery. Josh.
By now, investigators were aware that Ron Cabey had a connection to past incidents involving Sylvester. But with Ron still behind bars, who could this new, more proficient hitman be? The answer to that question nearly fell into their laps. Not long after arriving on scene, investigators found a key piece of evidence, which would quite literally point them in the right direction. Hidden in one of the springs under the wheel well of Sylvester's Acura was a GPS tracking device. It appeared that the men who'd been stalking him had planted the device in order to track him until they found the right moment to execute the hit. The device certainly worked. But what the assassins did not consider was that the device also worked in reverse. This was now a high-profile murder case, and Special Agent Michael Zufel of the FBI was brought on to take the lead in the investigation. After his team examined the tracker, they discovered some pertinent information. Because the tracker provided both real-time location data and a serial number, they were able to reverse track it all the way back to its origin. This led the FBI to an apartment on Belmont Avenue in Brooklyn, where multiple members of the Blood Street Gang were seen coming and going. They also found that the GPS tracker had been purchased and activated on September 29th, 6 days before Sylvester was murdered. Among the group of suspects was a man named Bouchon Shelton, who went by the nickname Shells. 35-year-old Bouchon Shelton was an active and high-ranking member of the Blood Street Gang in Brooklyn. He was involved in illicit activities by night, but ironically, he worked as a job recruiter for a temp agency by day. Agent Zufel and his team quickly tracked Bouchon down and arrested him, charging him in connection with the murder of Sylvester Zottola. They searched the apartment and found $45,000 in cash, along with several other pertinent pieces of evidence. Bouchon was booked into the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where Ron Cabey was already being held. As Agent Zufel's investigative team continued to compile evidence, including shell casings, a wavy wig, a black Nike baseball cap, and cellular phone data, things were looking quite dire for both Ron and Bouchon. Things, however, were looking great for Agent Zufel and his team. They applied pressure to both men, and after weighing his options, Ron decided to become a state's witness. He told them everything he knew about the situation with Sally Dawes, at least from the point at which he first got involved. This would break the case wide open, unraveling the mystery of why Sylvester Zottola had become a prime target for murder. According to Ron, he was introduced to Bouchon back in 2018. Bouchon, being the job recruiter that he was, offered Ron $10,000 to track down and kill Sylvester's son, Salvatore. Apparently, $10,000 was worth more than a stranger's life, and so Ron accepted the job. He provided Ron with a set of house keys and a padlock PIN code, along with a detailed itinerary of Salvatore's weekly schedule. This was the point at which Sylvester had already gone into hiding due to the prior attempts on his life. Bouchon figured that they could lure Sylvester out of hiding by killing his eldest son, which would force him to have to attend Salvatore's funeral and pay for the burial. Ron's first attempt to kill Salvatore was cut short before it even got started. He had gone to Salvatore's Locust Point home late at night, but when he saw police patrolling the area, he pulled the plug and left. Weeks later, Ron and a getaway driver named Dot would prepare for another attempt on Salvatore's life. This time, Bouchon would supply them with a beige minivan and instruct them to drive back to Salvatore's Locust Point home. They smoked marijuana while they waited for Bouchon, who was to provide Ron with a large hunting knife. The plan was for Ron to use the PIN code to enter Salvatore's home, sneak up on him, and stab him to death. But stoned, paranoid, and with knife in hand, he abandoned the plan after entering the wrong code multiple times and thinking a bystander had noticed him trying to break in. After too many failed attempts, Bouchon informed Ron of a change in plans. Now he wanted Ron to set his sights on the original target, Sally Dars. He would also connect Ron with a new driver, a 36-year-old man named Hyman Ross. Still using the beige minivan, Ron and Hyman drove out to Sylvester's Pelham Bay home after getting word that he was there. But as they got close, they noticed Salvatore on patrol outside. Salvatore noticed them as well and got on the phone with his brother Anthony. Ron and Hyman turned the van around and sped off, and this was the point at which Anthony was busy sending a text, causing him and Salvatore to miss their opportunity. Exactly 1 week later, Ron and Hyman received word that Sylvester was back at his home in Pelham Bay. They drove to Sylvester's house and parked a block away. Hyman waited behind the wheel while Ron walked towards the house. He noticed Sylvester standing outside with another man, and so he picked up the pace, withdrawing a gun from his pocket. This was the point at which Sylvester pulled out his own gun, fired a warning shot, and sent Ron fleeing back to his vehicle. And after running from the police, Ron was caught while Hyman got away. With Ron KB in jail, Hyman Ross would now take his place as the button man. He let a month go by, all the while plotting with Bouchon on how to kill Sylvester. Bouchon supplied him with a gun and a car and tasked him with recruiting a driver. He allegedly recruited Alfred Lopez, an associate of his from the Bronx. They decided, once again, that their best option was to kill Salvatore in order to draw Sylvester out. Bouchon told Hyman that Salvatore would be staying at his summer home in Locust Point and that he typically left the house at 6:30 each morning. They drove out and idled in a nearby parking lot, waiting until they had eyes on Salvatore. The information they'd received was correct, and Salvatore emerged from his house at around 6:38. While he loaded a few things into his van, the hitmen crept forward in their gray Nissan. Hyman leaned out of the passenger side window, taking aim at Salvatore. By the time Salvatore noticed anything, it was too late. This was the point at which Hyman unloaded a barrage of bullets into Salvatore as Salvatore's life flashed before his eyes. Although Hyman had failed to take Salvatore out, he certainly managed to apply significant pressure to the Zottola family. 3 months had gone by and Bouchon received word that Sylvester was having to travel back and forth to court over his unlicensed weapon charge. On September 29th, Bouchon purchased and activated a GPS tracking device. He instructed Hyman to install it under Sylvester's Acura, and from that point, they were able to know Sylvester's location at all times. On Thursday, October 4th, at around 4:20 p.m., they pinpointed his location, noting that he had just left the courthouse and was on East 161st Street. They tracked his movements, watching as he drove for 12 miles before pulling into the drive-thru of the McDonald's restaurant on Webster Avenue. In anticipation of his arrival, Hyman had Alfred park their vehicle on the street adjacent to the McDonald's drive-thru. He put on a wavy wig, a baseball cap, and a mask. He walked down an embankment next to the drive-thru exit, where he could hide behind a dumpster stall. With gun in hand, he waited until Sylvester made his order, then watched as he pulled up to the window to pick up his hot coffee. Hyman cocked his weapon, jogged over to the passenger side of the Acura, and fired 8 shots through the window. He watched as Sylvester slumped backwards, his car edging forward, before crashing into a storage bin. Hyman ran back to the gray Nissan and left the scene. On the afternoon of October 4, 2018, after a year of failed assassination attempts, 71-year-old Sylvester Zottola had been shot dead. Hyman texted Bouchon, informing him that the job had been accomplished. However, it's who Bouchon would forward the information to that would be the real shocker. It was Anthony Zottola, Sylvester's youngest son. He had been the one behind it all, orchestrating the hunt the entire time. The hunt that led to the attempted killing of his brother and the brutal killing of his father. A formal indictment was written, and Special Agent Zottola and his team tracked down and arrested Hyman Ross, Alfred Lopez, and Anthony Zottola for the premeditated murder of Sylvester Zottola. They found Anthony at his Larchmont residence, where they confiscated his phone and $130,000 in cash.
I had a feeling you were coming. When, I don't know, but I can thank you that it was after Father's Day and it was after all my kids' breakfast.
We're sitting here, we're given an opportunity to kind of explain what happened that day.
An opportunity to explain what?
After being charged with multiple felony counts, including murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful use and possession of a weapon, and causing death through use of a firearm, all three men were facing the rest of their lives in prison. Ron Cabey had already been cooperating in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence, and Bouchon Shelton decided to take a plea deal in which he admitted to his role in the crimes. Hyman Ross, knowing he had nothing to lose, decided that he would fight the charges and plead not guilty. Anthony Zottola pled not guilty as well. Anthony's defense team admitted that he was indeed involved initially, but that he had only intended to scare his father. They claimed that when Bouchon, a known gang affiliate, got involved, things took a change. They insisted that by then, Bouchon had taken matters into his own hands, deciding not to scare Sylvester, but rather to kill him. There was one problem with that argument, however. A little thing called evidence. Agent Zottola and his team had gathered a treasure trove of text messages, which consisted primarily of correspondences between Anthony and Bouchon. In one text, sent on August 15, 2017, Anthony wrote to Bouchon, "I do have a picture of that mechanic. I'll get it to you in a day or so." Always texting in code, they were careful not to use words that might be incriminating. However, Agent Zottola and his team were not new to this kind of cryptic communication. In another text, sent on September 8, Bouchon wrote to Anthony, "I passed your house and there's a lot of police out front. Just making sure you're okay." He was referring to the incident in which Sylvester was clubbed over the head after being asked if he had any jobs. As the attacks intensified, Anthony and Bouchon began using code language that referenced a movie they were pretending to produce. The job itself was referred to as the filming. The hitman was the director, and Anthony's father, Sylvester, was the actor. On Sunday, November 26, 2017, the day that Ron Cabey had attempted to force Sylvester into the beige minivan, Anthony texted the following to Bouchon. "The star doesn't come back. I need this bad. That is why I'm asking. Because I can see the film taking a twist." Bouchon replied, "Today was set to be the end finally, until the actor wanted to do his own stunts and throw it in reverse in the middle of shooting a scene and drive in the opposite direction." When it came to deciphering a cryptic message, this wasn't exactly the Da Vinci Code. On June 12, 2018, after Sylvester fired a warning shot at Ron Cabey, police body cam shows Anthony sending a text to someone before nervously asking if he can escort his father back inside.
Can he go inside? Is that okay?
Not right now.
Not can go inside right now.
Around July 11, 2018, Anthony texts Bouchon about targeting his brother, Salvatore, instead, letting him know that he would be at his Locust Point vacation home, which he referred to as the boathouse. After attempting to kill Salvatore, Bouchon later replied with, "They both had migraines and headaches," implying that the hit was unsuccessful. Finally, on October 4, 2018, minutes after Sylvester was murdered in cold blood, Hyman Ross texted a single word to Bouchon. "Done." Bouchon then texted Anthony, "Can we party today or tomorrow?" To which Anthony responded, using cases of water as reference to a $200,000 payout for the hit. "All good. Did you drink the water? Was it the right one?" Bouchon replied, "Definitely was the right one. Thanks. I was able to water the plants and get some of them squared away." Anthony replied, "Thank you for all your blessings. You truly, my brother." To which Bouchon texted, "My apologies for the time and headaches." Using the same phone, he then took a picture of a case of water containing $200,000 in banded currency. With the text messages, the tracking device, the surveillance footage, and Bouchon having insight into Sylvester and Salvatore's whereabouts at all times, Anthony's argument that the murder was Bouchon's decision didn't seem to hold much water. There was clear motive as well. Sylvester had worked for decades to build up his real estate development business, and by the time he died, it was worth an estimated $45 million. And while he was apparently preparing his sons to someday take over, it seemed that someday was too long a wait for Anthony. This, on top of Ron Caby's testimony, Bouchon Shelton's admission, and Anthony's brother Salvatore taking the stand, made it virtually impossible for Anthony's defense team to sway the jury. Both Anthony and Hyman were found guilty on all counts. In October of 2022, exactly 4 years after Sylvester Zottola was laid to rest, 45-year-old Anthony Zottola stood in court to receive his sentence for the crime. His attorney asked for leniency, calling him a family man who was in poor health, stating that he just wanted to be a source of support to his children. But Anthony's brother Salvatore took the stand to give his impact statement. And it certainly made an impact on the judge. Salvatore's eyes welled with tears as he looked at his younger brother Anthony and spoke a few simple words.
"Why? Answer me, my brother. What did you do? Dad gave you everything. What you did to me and Dad is unimaginable."
Anthony's sister Debbie also gave an emotional impact statement addressing Hyman Ross. She said that her dad had to live in fear as he was hunted down by assassins, and that the last year of his life was pure torture. The U.S. District Judge Hector Gonzalez then spoke, and it was clear that Anthony had not won his sympathy. He not only berated him for committing such a heinous and selfish crime, but for failing to show any remorse. He leaned forward and handed Anthony a life sentence with no possibility for parole. And if the life sentence was not long enough, he was given an additional 112 years. 71 years for each year his father had been alive, and 41 years for the weapons charges. 36-year-old Hyman Ross received the same sentence. And driver Alfred Lopez was found not guilty and acquitted of all charges, as there was not enough clear evidence to connect him to the crimes.
Were you surprised at the verdict?
Yes, very surprised. But I did my legal research the whole time, so I knew what I was expecting. You know.
What's it like to be out breathing fresh air tonight?
Feels great. Feels great.
In June of 2023, Bouchon Shelton was sentenced to 37 years in prison. Ron Caby is still waiting sentencing. Although Sylvester was the victim in this case, there were several news reports that criticized him for having ties to the Bonanno family. But those who knew him personally, particularly his daughter, expressed that he was a good man who had spent his entire life devoting himself to his community and his children. Some of us would like to believe that even those who display the most narcissistic psychopathic behavior have some form of moral code by which they abide. And perhaps, beneath the destructive intentions, exists a person who is capable of compassion. However, it is naive to believe this, for these people do not see things the way the average person sees them. Instead, they operate within a dark triad of personality traits: a lack of remorse, a sense of absolute entitlement, and a strategic readiness to deceive and exploit others. They feel they are smarter than the average individual, and that through calculated manipulation and sometimes violence, they can rid themselves of those who are in their way, even if they happen to be a close family member such as a sibling or a father. Leave your thoughts on the Sally Dars case below, and don't forget to hover over the subscribe button, and then click. I've been your host, Dr. Top Hat Shadow, and this is The Shadow Self.